From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Wednesday the 11th of January 2023. Good afternoon. In today's Spotlight story, we run through the reported capture of Soledar. This isn't the only thing happening in the world though, so we'll run through three of today's other important stories. And in our exclusive Nebula section, I sit down with Rory and discuss the newest independent MP. But first, what's been happening in Soledar? Soledar, an embattled town in Ukraine, is particularly important for two major reasons. First, Soledar has a wide network of salt mines that form a network under the city. Its capture would allow Russian forces to use these to launch attacks against the Ukrainians. Second, Soledar is very close to Bakhmut, a strategically important city in the war. This is because it lies in between a very important supply line between Donetsk and Luhansk. If the Russian invading forces were to fully capture it, they'd be able to deny Ukraine the supply route and, in essence, give Ukraine a taste of their own medicine. Throughout the war so far, Ukraine has been devastating Russian supply lines, making the war harder to fight. For these reasons, Soledar is seeing a huge amount of fighting in the first few weeks of 2023. In fact, so much so that it's crudely being referred to as the meat grinder. So it's easy to see why Ukraine has put so much effort into trying to ensure that the Russians never get their hands on Soledar. Unfortunately for them this morning, it appears that the Russians may have finally captured the town. Now, we should note here that there are actually competing claims about who controls the town. The UK's Ministry of Defence said this morning that the Wagner Group, who are in essence Russian mercenaries, are now likely to control Soledar. Evgeny Prigozhin, the head of the mercenary group, posted a photo of himself surrounded by Wagner Group troops in what appeared to be one of the city's salt mines. He said later on Tuesday that Wagner units took control of the entire territory of Soledar. A cauldron has been formed in the centre of the city in which urban fighting is going on. Kyiv disputes this and says that its soldiers are holding out in Soledar. A Ukrainian military spokesperson said Russia say that it's under their control. It is not true. Speaking of the fighting in Soledar, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said there was almost no life left, and this is what madness looks like. If the town has been or eventually is captured by Russia, it will be a symbolic and strategic victory, but not without cost, as by all indications, the fighting has been fierce. Okay, so that's the biggest story of the day, but there's a lot more going on around the world. So here's a rundown of three other stories. It was reported yesterday that the Metropolitan Police detected a package at London's Heathrow Airport that contained a small amount of uranium on the 29th of December 2022. A counter-terrorism commander has claimed that there was only a small amount of the substance found and that it posed no serious risk to the general public. The package was on its way to some Iranian nationals living in the UK and had arrived on a flight from Oman, which originated in Pakistan. It has been claimed that the incident is not linked to any direct threat, although investigations are ongoing. The former head of the British Army's Chemical Weapons Unit has claimed that while there is no indication yet that a group such as Al-Qaeda were involved, it does have their fingerprints all over it. He added that we must be open to the fact that this might be some sort of terror type thing. There's more on the way, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make the daily briefing part of your daily routine, or just search for us on your podcast app to listen along. President Emmanuel Macron's government has unveiled its plans to reform the French pension system, which includes pushing the retirement age from 62 to 64, bringing it closer in line with its European neighbours. The government faces an almighty battle over the long-delayed and unpopular reform, which is opposed by 8 out of 10 French citizens, according to a recent poll. Meanwhile, trade unions swiftly called for a strike against the plans on January the 19th. Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne set out the plans cautiously and admitted it will spark fears and questions among the French people. The increase in retirement age wouldn't happen immediately, but would take place over time between 2027 and 2030. The government says the reforms would represent gross savings of €17.7 billion a year by 2030. In his first term, Macron's government attempted to overhaul the pension system, but scrapped plans in 2020 amid mass protests and disruption from COVID. We can expect heated debates on the measures in the National Assembly, where Macron's party does not have a majority, as the furthest left and furthest right blocs have vowed to oppose them. Peru's new president, Dina Boluarte, is facing a genocide inquiry after 17 civilians died in clashes with security forces in the south of the country on Monday. Peru's top prosecutor announced that Boluarte, as well as the country's prime minister, defense minister and others, were being investigated on charges of genocide, qualified homicide and serious injuries. More than 40 people have been killed and hundreds injured amid protests, demonstrations and clashes since early December. Monday was the deadliest of the protests so far, with 17 civilians killed. Violence continued on Tuesday as a police officer died after his car was torched. Protests broke out in Peru last month following the impeachment, removal and arrest of former President Pedro Castillo, who had tried illegally to dissolve Congress. Castillo's vice president became president, but supporters of the ousted leader, many of whom are poor and indigenous Peruvians, are calling for early elections and his release from jail. In the final uplifting story today, we discuss the ozone layer. Climate scientists have been sounding the alarm about the terrible damage humanity is doing to our planet for years now. Unfortunately, politicians have not taken adequate action, and it seems that most days we're bombarded with news about the dire situation we find ourselves in. Now, while it is important to remind ourselves of the work yet to be done on the environment, it's also worth looking at some of the more uplifting news and praising the work that has already been done. It's been revealed today that the ozone layer is on its way to recovering, thanks to the efforts made to cut back on chlorofluorocarbons, which are ozone-damaging chemicals. This was thanks to the Montreal Protocol, which made countries phase out these chemicals. The latest report on this protocol found that almost 99% of these banned chemicals have been phased out, and that, if the current trajectory continues, the ozone layer will recover by 2040. So there are certainly some reasons not to feel completely hopeless about the current state of environmental politics. That's all we have time for on YouTube today, but if you want to see our discussion of why Andrew Bridgen had the whip removed, then watch the extended ad-free edition of the Daily Briefing over on Nebula. Now might be the time to do it, as there's an offer which gets you a year of membership for less than $1 a month. That's huge because Nebula subscribers not only get everything you've already watched ad-free, but also an extended edition of the show every single day, available to watch on Nebula or stream on your podcast app of choice. They also get access to a ton of other exclusive ad-free TLDR content, as well as videos from all your favourite creators. The good news is, like I mentioned, our friends at CuriosityStream, the streaming service which offers you some of the world's best documentaries, is offering an incredible deal whereby you can get both platforms, CuriosityStream and Nebula, for less than $12 a year. That's all the documentaries you could want on CuriosityStream, and then more TLDR content on Nebula, including the extended briefing, other full exclusive TLDR videos, and it's always ad-free. Click the link below to get both services for less than $1 a month, a deal which doesn't last long, and support the channel.